Good morning, everyone. How are we doing? Sold out performance over here, huh? Okay, dear friends. First of all, welcome to everybody who's joining us for the first time, and also joining us for the first time in person. So welcome, Fawn. Welcome, Matt. Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you.
It's okay. I'm just saying your name just to pick on you, just because. No. Someone once told me if you want to get an aliyah in shul, talk during the Torah reading. They call you up to get an aliyah. Right? That's the trick. All right.
Not surprising.
Somebody shows up to a doctor one day and says, "Doctor, I don't know what's wrong with me. I woke up this morning, I look in the mirror, and I look horrible." This doctor says, "Okay, let's take a look at you." Doctor says, "Okay, listen. You got good news, you got bad news. The good news is you have wonderful vision." All right. What's the bad news? It's okay. All right. This is considered a perfect representative Borscht Bell joke. This is a Borscht Bell joke. Okay, dear friends. Today's class, continuing advice for life from the Rebbe, is about health, which is, of course, a very emotionally charged topic, and it's a topic that it's an area of life that would come to the Rebbe's doorstep quite often, because it's an area that, whether we like it or not, at some point of life, whether it's ourselves or a loved one or somebody who we care about a lot, is going through a little bit of a health difficulty, health crisis. And we're definitely in a very vulnerable space at those times. And the Rebbe used to actually speak about this. The Rebbe didn't like it, but the Rebbe used to get the most, people used to reach out to the Rebbe most when there were problems. The Rebbe used to always say, "Why don't you let me know when there's good news?" And the Rebbe meant it. He very genuinely meant it. People would rush to the Rebbe to report to him every piece of bad news and ask for a blessing and ask for advice. And then when things would get better, they wouldn't tell the Rebbe about it. That's why you got to get me nervous, and then you don't update me to tell me that everything's doing okay. So health is a very key area, very big area that people would come to the Rebbe with concerns. And we have so much from the Rebbe on health, and hopefully in the next hour and a half we'll be able to get at least a little bit of a glimpse, a little bit of a general overview on a general level. You know, you can never compare any two situations, right? We spoke about this last week, right? The number one rule about giving advice is that there are no rules, right? Every single person, every single case is different and personal, but at the same time, at least we get some general principles over here. And of course, as we always do in this course, we have the unbelievable fortune that we have so much media, recordings of the Rebbe, which allow us to really get a first-hand experience of hearing and experiencing the Rebbe's advice come to life. So, dear friends, that is what we're going to be doing in today's class. And just to note, this week is physical health, mental health, and anxiety is next week. All right, so that's going to be part 2 for this. So we're going to be splitting those topics. Hey, it's physical health. Before we jump into the specifics of today's topic, I want to speak for a few moments about something we've touched upon in all the previous classes, but it's especially front and center in today's class. The way the Rebbe looked at life in general, which is especially true about healing. I think it's pretty conventional to think about life as somewhat fragmented. And what I mean by that is there are different worlds, and every single world is different and separate. So what's an example of that? Spiritual and physical. There's spiritual reality and spiritual stuff that need to happen. That's spiritual. Then there's real life, physical life, material life. It's material life, two separate worlds. If you want to talk about medicine, there's physical health, there's emotional health, there's also spiritual health. Each one's a different world. In the Rebbe's worldview, there was absolute unity. And the word is holistic. The Rebbe had a very holistic view of life in general. There is no split. There's no departmentalization Departmentalization. There's only one God. God made the world with one purpose. And there's a center of gravity for everything in this world, and everything is deeply connected. Physical reality is deeply intertwined with spiritual reality. One affects the other, one impacts the other, each is dependent on the other. And they're not just each running on different tracks, but rather there's a certain inherent unity. There's an inner system to all of reality, and it's all interconnected. It's a holistic approach that Rebbe had to life in general. We've seen it over the past two classes. Body and soul, spirit and matter. These are not two separate worlds. They come together. Right? In lesson 1, what did we say? Work is also spiritual. It's part of your spiritual purpose. Spirituality helps your work. Right? For family life, practical family life is important for your spiritual mission. Spirituality is good for your family, like the example of Shabbos, right? They come together. I want to read this text with you. It's a deep text. We really don't have the time to give it the proper justice that such a text needs. So we'll read it. And it's a little bit heavy and dense, but we'll at least begin the process. Let us begin. Text 1 on page 61 in your books. And this text really captures the spirit of this idea. So, Stuart, whenever you're ready, text 1.
A singular purpose. There is a school of teaching that promotes the predominance of form over matter. It expounds of the unique quality of the material when it is purified, and the unique quality of the form when it is integrated with the material. The two are to be so thoroughly fused that one cannot detect where either of them begins or ends, for their beginning is wedged into the end, and their end into the beginning. The one God created them both, and for one purpose, to reveal the light of the holiness of his hidden power. Only both of them together complete the perfection desired by the Creator. This is the school of the teachings of Hasidism. Hasidism, excuse me.
Yeah, that's okay. They're kind of the same thing, no?
Yeah.
All right. What's the idea? Don't see life as a split. Don't see life as a competition. Body and soul, spiritual and material. The real purpose is to see how they are truly one. So let's put this up over here. This is the Rebbe's holistic approach. The Rebbe saw no separation between spirituality and physicality, and this inherent unity directs the Rebbe's medical advice. We're going to see, and actually the place where I saw this, I once saw an interview, and we're going to be seeing one of such interviews soon. The Rebbe was very, very in touch with especially Jewish medical leaders in Israel, especially in the early years, the formative years of the state of Israel. And I once saw an interview with one of these doctors. He's probably, when he gave the interview a few years ago, he was a very, very, he was probably in his 90s then. And he said the Rebbe taught him the art of holistic medicine, holistic treatment. And this was a very big theme, how really everything is one. And I want to begin with this attitude, with this anchor in mind. Let us begin the journey of the Rebbe's advice. Through healing, through medicine. And I'll just tell you, there's going to be 3 parts to today's class. The first, let's begin the very first piece of advice from the Rebbe about healing is, number 1, let's put it up here on the screen, good energy. Good energy. Which means, we all know that whenever there's a medical crisis, it's not a place where, we're usually not in a good space. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of bad thoughts. The first thing is, the Rebbe taught is, there has to be good spirits for the patient and for the family, and even the doctor. We'll get to that soon. But the family, the friends who are supporting this patient have to be promoting a lot of positivity and simply good vibes, good energy. Now, this is something the Rebbe was talking about years, decades before, in the more modern age, this has been promoted. Today we know that on a very simple, pragmatic level, patients do better in healing when they are in a good space. Right? When a patient is good mentally and emotionally, if you're emotionally strong, they can fight an illness. when the patient is broken and dejected and negative and already gave up, the patient themselves don't really fight back against whatever it is. They don't fight back to get healthy again. But the Rebbe was speaking about this in the 50s. This was before it was popular to speak this way. The way the Rebbe saw it is, when you are healing a body, when you are treating a body, you can't look at the body in isolation. You're not just healing a body, flesh and blood. You have to heal the whole unit. Mind, body, soul. The whole unit. Holistic healing. Here's a demonstration of this. Of just creating this positivity. There was a doctor. His name is Professor Mordechai Shani. Professor Mordechai Shani is a celebrated doctor, professor of medicine in Israel. You could look him up online, all the wonderful accolades and the different positions he filled. He was most famous, he became most famous. He was a director of medicine for over 30 years in the Sheba Medical Center near Tel Aviv, which is considered one of the top medical centers in the whole world. Right? You know what number it is, Max, offhand? See the top 5 or top 10, but...
No, I don't know. I know a guy who does some fundraising.
For Sheba. Okay.
Yeah, he used to be with APEC now.
He went there.
Sheba.
Yeah, it's a top medical center. So for 30, 40 years he was there. He's not there anymore. Now he's a professor in Tel Aviv, in the university in Tel Aviv. Dr. Mordechai Shani, Professor Mordechai Shani. The Rebbe had a relationship with him. They corresponded a lot. There's a lot of letters printed of the Rebbe's letters to Professor Shani about medicine. One of the things the Rebbe confronted him with, and the Rebbe wanted that he should try to change this, is what is the name for a hospital? Does anybody know? What's the name for a hospital in Hebrew? Beit Cholim. What does Beit Cholim mean? House of the sick. The Rebbe said, why do you call it that name? Let's put it up over here. If you look at the screen. Beit Cholim means a home for the sick. The Rebbe suggested, and the Rebbe wanted Professor Shani to try to change in Israeli culture, to change it from Bet Cholim to, look at the screen, Bet Refuah, a house of healing. Which means, just think about it. Number one, you don't go to a hospital to be sick. You go to a hospital to heal, to get better. So it's a better name. It's more descriptive. It's more representative of what a hospital actually is. But more importantly, they ever said, what attitude does it give somebody when you tell them, we got to go to the house for the sick people? You're not excited about going there. It's bad vibes. It's negative vibes. It's a downer. Instead, when he tells them we're going to the house of health, house of healing, here's where we make people get better. Oh, that's positive. The Rebbe said it has a subliminal effect on the patients. And the Rebbe really asked Professor Shani to try to change it. And indeed, I asked a friend yesterday, an Israeli friend, did things change? And he said it did. A lot of hospitals changed their official name from Bet Cholim, whichever city, to Merkaz Refuah, Center of Healing. Slowly but surely, it's still colloquially known as a Bet Cholim, but at least on the signage, it is called Merkaz Refuah, some even Bet Refuah, and there is a lot of discussion within Israeli society about this, about the change of name, and about and how the Rebbe wanted this to happen. So I want to read this with you, what the Rebbe wrote, the Rebbe's letter to Professor Shani. Very, very powerful letter. And by the way, we're going to be watching a video from Professor Shani towards the end of today's class. So we're gonna meet the doctor. Debbie, you want to give it a read? Text 3, page 63.
Text 3. Text 3 on page?
Text 3, yes. We are jumping a little bit.
A matter of dates. I certainly recall that when you paid a visit here together with your colleagues, we had an in-person meeting. I hope that you similarly recall my suggestion at that meeting. Instead of referring to a hospital in Hebrew as Beit Cholim, an institute for the sick, it should be called Beit Refuah, an institution for healing. One might consider this semantics, a meaningless exchange of terms, but in fact, this change alone is sufficient to offer encouragement to those in need of healing. More importantly, this upgrade in title better highlights the institution's true goal, Its purpose is to bring healing, and wherever possible, complete healing. So I persist in referring to the institution with a title that does not fit its purpose.
There you go, right? It's not mere semantics, but it's sufficient. This change alone is sufficient to give people hope, and it's more representative. So here we're seeing how the Rebbe was promoting the idea that number one in health, there has to be this very strong concern for making sure that the patients, those who need to go through healing, are being given the opportunity to be in a good space. So number one, it's, as I mentioned before, it's very pragmatic. It's good business, right? People heal better when they're in a good space. But there's something even deeper. It goes even deeper. There's something very spiritual over here. The Rebbe quoted very, very often from the Zohar, from the Kabbalah, this following idea, which gives a whole different appreciation for the importance of a positive energy, especially when we need it. You want to read, Mark?
Oh, yes.
Text 2. We're going to go back to text 2.
Oh.
I'm keeping you on your toes tonight. You got to get caffeinated.
Throwing me off here.
I'm throwing you off. Go get a
All right.
coffee.
The,
Text 2, page 62.
the Divine Mirror. I believe I have told you in the past that the Holy Zohar states that when a person in this physical world has a radiant countenance, they are joyful. They thereby draw down upon themselves responses of the same positive kind from heaven. This provides us with an even better understanding of the aphorism of our holy Rebbe's. Trach gut vet sein gut. Think positively and you will see positive results. May God grant you success in this so that you will be able to share positive news.
Well, not only is there some pragmatic reason that it's better for the patient, better for the doctors, better for the hospital, if the patients are in a good mood, but there's something very, very powerful here. Kabbalah teaches that the way God gives us energies, He mirrors back whatever we exhibit. If we are in a negative space, then we don't get the best energies from heaven. When we put ourselves in a good space and we're joyful and positive, God radiates back to us the blessings of positivity and goodness. Sarah says it's critical that there's joy. It's critical that there's a positive outlook, a positive energy, even during these times. You need blessings now more than usual. So this is the best time to make sure that there's a lot of positivity surrounding this patient. It's like that itself brings God's blessings. And the Rebbe quotes over here, we're going to be talking about it soon also later on in today's class. There's a famous saying that comes from the Chabad Rebbe's. It's Yiddish, right? Tracht gut wird sein gut. Think good, think positively, and it will be good. You will see positive results. It's not just like a good pep talk. Don't worry, try hard, it'll be good. It's a real thing. When you think good, you are creating goodness around you. God gives you goodness. So it becomes critical. It becomes critical that you are in a good space. That is what brings God's blessings. I'll tell you something. I told you earlier about my great-grandfather. Last week I told you a story about him, right? I'll tell you another story about him. He was always very, very sick, even as a young man. He was always going through medical challenges. And he was a very negative person. He was a natural pessimist. And anytime he got sick, okay, I'm dying. And literally, he would tell his daughter, I'm not going to make it to your wedding. I'm probably going to die before your wedding. He was a very negative person. He died at 92. I met him, but at 30 he thought that he's maybe a year left to live or something like that. And there's a Hebrew term for him, a mara shchora. He was very dark and always negative and always. Anyways, who knows what trauma these survivors had. Anyways, that was his shtick. He was a very tough person, but he was negative. And the Rebbe would always encourage him, stop being negative. You got to throw away all this negativity. And he was once having an audience with the Rebbe. He was in the Rebbe's room. And he was very negative about life. He was very depressed about life. And medical challenges, I believe it was. And the Rebbe stood up from his desk, which the Rebbe never did. The Rebbe was always very uniform, sat by his desk. The Rebbe wasn't even a very emotionally expressive person. There was a certain composure to the Rebbe. For the Rebbe to stand up in the middle of an audience was very rare. And the Rebbe went to the bookshelf, and took out the volume of the Zohar and opened it up and said, look here in these words. And he read these words there. What you show God, that's what God gives you. You want blessings in your life? Cut out the negativity. Start getting joy going. Very powerful. So that's the second idea.
have a
God
question.
mirrors us.
You make it
Yes.
sound so easy to be positive.
Oh,
in
we'll
pain.
talk about that in a second.
How do you-
Right, easier said than done.
If you're living in pain, physical
How are you supposed to
pain,
do it?
How are you supposed to do it?
We're going to talk about that. Yes. Right, all this sounds good, very good in theory.
In theory.
In practice, how do we actually make this happen? That's a great question. We're going to get to that. So this is the first principle from the Rebbe, that number one, whenever there is a medical emergency, a medical crisis, whatever it is, priority number one, positivity. Why? It's very healthy practically, and it's very healthy spiritually. This is very, very important. This is what brings God's blessings. Okay. What's the only problem? It's easier said than done, no? When somebody is not doing good, has all of a sudden, is hit over the head with a medical emergency, you're not really in the best frame of mind to start creating positivity. So how do we do this? How do we create this positive space that the Rebbe is telling us to do? Such a good question, right? How do we actually do this? The Rebbe I'm going to share with you 3 suggestions. 3 suggestions that the Rebbe repeated these suggestions often. Each of these suggestions, I'm also going to show you a video so that we could see the Rebbe's advice coming to life. And each of these suggestions are there to help teach us the art of keeping positive, even when either us or family member who we're supporting is going through a difficult time in regards to health. Number one is the idea of remaining productive. This was practical advice from the Rebbe. How do we stay positive? The patient must remain productive. The idea behind this is very, very simple. When people get sick, and if they need to go to the hospital, what usually happens is they immediately, life comes to a halt. Their social life, their work life, and they become very unproductive. They're in hospital a whole day, they're in pajamas a whole day, they're in a hospital gown a whole day. And what that does is, we all know, when we have a good, productive day, how do we feel at the end of the day? We feel good, we feel fulfilled. And when we just had a day we did nothing, we feel empty at the end of the day. We don't feel good. The Rebbe said, at the essence of the human condition, the essence of the human soul, there's a need for productivity. It's actually the very first thing that God told Adam and Eve. I put you here in this world, work the land, guard the world, fix the world, make it better. We're here to work. Humans are here to be productive. The problem is you go to a hospital, become very unproductive. And a lack of productivity, it just makes you very lethargic. It makes you very empty inside. And it doesn't make you feel good. And perhaps the number one thing that happens that saps a person from positive energy after becoming sick is the fact that they're simply doing nothing. Simply that. And therefore, what's the answer to such people? Them if they could, but especially family and friends and the doctor have to try to support them in being productive, which is not always so simple. What's the best way to be productive? Not necessarily is getting a call from the office saying you've got a deadline coming up the best way to help someone who's laying in a hospital bed. But everybody has a way. First of all, visitations. Friends coming, schmoozing. That itself, you could fill a person with so much life. You go to the hospital, spend an hour with a guy by his bedside. He feels good, you feel good. Social life is also being productive. But there's so many things. You got to sometimes be a little bit creative. But somebody who's sick, the worst thing is for them to be sitting and doing nothing. And I have to tell you that as a rabbi, and I've done a good amount of hospital visitations and visiting people in this specific type of vulnerable time of I think that the number one form of pain that they suffer from is a total emptiness in life. And unfortunately, too many people say, no one visits me, and I've got nothing going on. They feel their life is it's a very depressing feeling. But that's it, it's over. Yeah, I used to have friends we used to go out with, now nothing. My friends don't talk to me anymore. I'm just here in the hospital for 2 weeks. But it's really horrible. And it's something which we really have to make sure, the Rebbe said, they have to put in the efforts, but this is probably something that family and friends have more of a role in helping and supporting such people to make sure they stay productive. And I want to show you this video over here. So the idea is, yes, rest is very important for healing, but maybe even more important than rest is a sense of fulfillment of being productive. That productivity results in fulfillment, which is very instrumental in positive energies, which result in healing. Here's our first video for today.
Rabbi Joseph Telushkin is a rabbi, lecturer, and best-selling author. His father, Shlomo Telushkin, served as the accountant for Merkas Linyonei Chinuch, the educational arm of Chabad Lubavitch.
My father had a lot of nachas, a lot of pleasure from his career as an accountant. He never made a tremendous amount of money. He always made enough. We always lived well. But his pleasure derived from the fact that he worked for organizations that he felt passionately attached to. Chabad, he had a very strong feeling for, but he was also Mizrahi because my father was a Zionist. He also was the accountant for the revisionists and for an organization called Ezra Torah headed by Rav Henkin, which helped Talmidei Chachamim who were in need. So he had a lot of pleasure from the work he was doing. But as he got older, he started gradually to semi-retire and gave up his other accounts. The only account he always kept was the account for Chabad and Merkaz. And in 1986, I at the time was living in Israel, and I got a phone call from my mother that my father had had a stroke. And I immediately flew back. And my mother had somewhat underplayed how serious it was. She just said to me I should come home immediately, but not wanting to make me even more nervous. My father really at first was hovering between life and death, and he was not conscious for several days. And I came back, and every day we would get 2 phone calls, usually from Rabbi Krinsky from the office. The Rebbe wants to know how your father is, and I would report it. And then on maybe the second day or so that I was back, my father came out of his unconsciousness. He was still in ICU in the intensive care unit, and he was a little befuddled. It was, in a sense, my father at the time was 80, and it was very sad. He had always been in very good health. And as I said, he was continuing his work as an accountant, and he always had great pleasure. On Shabbos, he used to give a weekly shiur in Talmud. And my father's life, to some extent, was like a person running full speed ahead who runs into a brick wall. Because all of a sudden, in one day, he could no longer do his work, and he really couldn't learn in any systematic way. His mind would go in and out of being confused, but we would continue to get these calls twice daily. And then one day, about 5 days after my father had come out of his unconsciousness, I pick up the phone, and it was Rabbi Krinsky. And this time, though, he has a question. The Rebbe has an accounting question for your father. So I said to him, but Rabbi Krinsky, you know how sick my father is? And he said, yes, we had a meeting of the leadership today, and an accounting issue came up, and the Rebbe said, ask Shlomo. And, we said, we mentioned your father's illness, and the Rebbe said, I know, ask Shlomo. And so at that point, of course, I took down the question exactly as it was posed. I brought it in to my father, and he was able to answer it. And this was an extremely moving event for me, because I realized there was the Rebbe in his office in Brooklyn with tremendous responsibilities for many things all over the world. And he was thinking about my father's situation, lying there in a hospital bed, probably feeling fairly useless. And he came up with a question that my father was able to answer. And I know it immediately made my father feel much better. I mean, my father looked at me and he said, yeah, do this, this, this. And this had an enormous impact on me, this incident, because it's what really made me aware to a remarkable extent of the Rebbe, who had assumed these international leadership roles and yet remained focused on the individual.
Very powerful story here. I think I mentioned this also by the first class, right?
You did.
But this is, now we're hearing it straight from the source. But the idea is, everyone wanted to give him a sense that you're useful, People are still thinking about you. You can still be productive. And that is the very first thing that the Rebbe wanted patients to have. A sense of productivity, which is a very practical first step to being positive and just simply feeling good about yourself.
The question is, should you give someone a task that you know he can perform? Because if he can't, then he's frustrated, he feels worse.
Yeah, this is when you need a lot of good discretion. So everybody has to, again, every person's different, and what you feel would be most appreciated by somebody is going to be different from person to person. And a good friend hopefully will make the right call. All right, dear friends, that is point number one. Moving on to point number two, going a little bit deeper, perhaps a little bit more profound. This is a very powerful one. The Rebbe said like this: nothing happens in this world. Nothing happens in this world without God orchestrating it, making it happen for a specific purpose. Everything that happens is for a purpose. And the Rebbe said, if you find yourself in a hospital, you are there for a purpose, for a specific divine mission. And therefore, what you need to do is to sense that purpose, look for it, to know that you are a man on a mission. You are not just a victim of happenstance, but you are here for a reason. Try to identify what that purpose is. You are not in a hospital for no good reason. You are there for a reason. Let's read this letter. I'm also going to show you a video. This is a letter to somebody who is suffering from a foot ailment. All right, letter there wrote in 1959, going through a lot of pain and difficulty with his foot. It's a much longer letter. A part of this letter is actually printed in the at the end of this lesson. We always have a bunch of additional readings, additional letters from the Rebbe at the end of the lesson. Let's read text 4. Where are we holding? Linda, where by you? You're doing okay there? Playing Tetris?
No,
No, I'm just kidding. Don't worry.
this is,
I'm just kidding. Don't worry about that.
no, I just had to give her a code.
Don't worry about it. All right, so we'll give it to Al. Al will take this one. All right, Al. Text 4.
Finding the purpose. You wrote to request a blessing for your health. And at an auspicious occasion, I will mention you for a blessing in this regard at the greatest night of my esteemed father-in-law, the saintly Rebbe. It is the nature and the hereditary reality of all Jews to believe in God. What is necessary, however, is for each Jewish individual to allow their inherent faith to actively influence their thought processes throughout the day. In other words, we need we need to actively seek to identify the divine providence in each occurrence and in each feature of our daily experiences. Although God's providence hides behind the screen that we refer to as the nature, we must recognize the truth. As long as we have not yet identified the point of divine providence in any particular event or reality, we have not yet really understood that event or reality.
These last lines are powerful. As long as we have not yet identified the point of divine providence, we have not yet truly understood that event or reality. You're not really in touch with what's happening until you get in touch with the divine purpose, with the idea that God is guiding you here. That's very profound. And they would very often tell people when they found themselves in difficult situations, and especially when all of a sudden they have to find themselves in a hospital, and who wants to be stuck in a hospital for a week or two, and things like that, you're there for a reason. Don't look at this as just an annoying, you're a victim of happenstance. See yourself as a man on a mission. Try to figure out what you're doing there. Let's watch a video. You ready for this?
1989, right before Rosh Hashanah, my father suffered a stroke. He ended up in the hospital. At Rosh Hashanah, when I get a call from Rabbi Leibel Groner, the Rebbe's secretary, the Rebbe wants to see me immediately. The Rebbe came out with a quintus with one of the booklets that he had given out the night before. And he said to me, "Das ist für Taten." And then the Rebbe smiled, and he said to me, "Zog dem Taten," in Yiddish, "Tell your father that when he'll finish the mission for which he was sent there, he will be released." Went straight to NYU. I brought the kuntras, and I told my father exactly what the Rebbe had said. I remember my mother started running around. Miftzoyim.
He was pretty helpless in bed, but I took a pushka and I ran around the whole hospital, and I took money, and I gave the patients money to put into the pushka. But I sent a message to Label that please find out, it's mostly goyim there. What do I do? So a message got like 2 minutes later. He called me back. He said, goyim have to give tzedakah. So I just went all over the place and gave tzedakah.
Era in hospital para operation.
Von dort in diesem Arrest sind die hinterher. Ich glaube, man sagt im Hospital. Ich meine, es ist als Doktor. Das war total noch viel, ich weiß es nicht weiter. Die Morgen sagt, die Mail, der nicht ich kann nicht so alles sagen. Ich bin hier, ich kann nicht so He's active in the hospital house, but smelling Yiddish.
Well, we just started walking about now, so on Shabbos.
But you can invite all the patients to him in
Well, I'll have
the you can pronounce even he has a speech here that he hasn't pronounced.
No, I'll tell him, yeah.
That he can use it in the problem of talking to him in the tour. Die Language is meant to be stock it I think so. Yeah. Die dort allein dort nicht stocken. Dann dort die Kinder noch ein paar Rieden für solchen Sorgen.
She's being admitted today for surgery tomorrow on the leg.
That's a new surgery. That will be a short area. You have a docket push with you. Then you'll take it in the hospital.
She has it.
Huh?
She is taking a tzedakah pushka with her in the hospital.
The hospital, yeah, and put the doctors there also. And I've got one matches in the hospital also. Yeah, then you'll have a good news.
My child Mendel is not well. He was in the hospital. So I called up Rebbe Chadakov just to tell him that, I'm going, my little boy's in the hospital, and I'm here in the hospital with him. It goes quiet on the line for a little bit. And then Rebbe Chadakov comes back on the line and he says like this. Sicher hat der Eberster nicht gemacht, dass der Kind soll sein in Hospital, und du sollst haben Magbas Nefesh. Certainly, the Eberster didn't make such a thing happen so that you should be anguished because of it. Sicher is dort ein Fran a Schlichus dir zu tun. You certainly have a Schlichus that you have to do there. Geh gefinnes and do us. Go find it and do it.
Right before Yom Kippur, my father did come out from the hospital, and he went by the Rebbe for Lekach.
Mit Mischalien, als ein Waffen verwunden, und als ein bisschen so zu gesagt. Ich sage, es werden eine Anordnung, ich habe es nicht versehen. Wir will einen die Kinder, ich habe lieben, einen guten Weg. Dann haben die Waffen verwunden.
So wherever you find yourself, whether it's, they said, in a beautiful place or a hospital, God leads the footsteps of a person, and you're going to have to figure out, understand what is the mission of why God put me in this place. There's a reason I'm here, and I have to redeem it and find the reason and the purpose, the mission of my being there.
There's a lot to unpack in that video, but there's a few different messages there if we want to get into it. But the essential point is, you have to see yourself, there's a reason why you're going there. To do a mitzvah there, who knows, we'll meet there. And when you have that attitude, it helps you stay in a good space. That's advice number 2 for keeping a positivity. Point number 3, which is last, but very much not least, very, very critical point, and it's a real pillar of the Rebbe's view over here, is that when somebody finds themselves in a difficult situation, and especially in a health situation, which always shakes a person, it's always a crisis, the Rebbe said this is a time that a person needs to work on cultivating further trust in God. Bitachon, right? That's the word, bitachon. They're bitachon in God, which is trust. And it's very interesting. In Hebrew, there are two words. There is a word for faith, which is emunah, and then there's bitachon, trust. So you got belief, you got trust. So you could either believe in God, and then there's something else called trusting in God. What's the difference? Is there a difference? Believing in God, trusting in God? So the United States dollar says, in God we trust. What about in God we believe? What's the idea of trust specifically over belief? And there's a very, very simple difference. You could believe in something. That's much easier. But do you trust? Everybody believes in the IRS. But do you trust the IRS? You could use any government agency for that one. Yeah, I believe there's a God. No. Do you trust that God is going to take good care of you? That's a Jewish value. A Jew needs to have a sense that I can trust God. You know, trust is a very strong thing. It means I'll trust that you're going to hold me. I could lean myself on you and you're going to take good care of me. That's trust. The Rebbe would say, bitachon, trust in God itself brings blessings. It's the conduit for the blessings. When a Jew shows God that I'm fully putting my trust in you, and he mentally and emotionally is in that space, that itself elicits God's blessings. That brings God's blessings. So beyond bitachon being a good Jewish value, and it's very important, a Jew has to have a sense of trusting in God. That itself is the key to bringing God's blessings, and that's also the key to being happy. When you know that God's taking good care of you, you could breathe easier, you're more calm, you're less anxious. You know it's all going to work out for the best. God's in control. That brings the blessings. So there's a Jewish folks tale. I don't know if it's true or not, but it is a story. Once upon a time, there was a Jewish community, and it was a drought, dry season, and it was very, very bad. No crops were growing. There was no rain. And the Jews were praying and praying to God. Nothing was happening. So the rabbi decided we're all going to come together, every single person in the community, man, woman, and child. We're going to go to the fields outside of the city, and we're all going to do a communal prayer to God, and hopefully by the collective prayer of the whole community, it will bring God's blessings. So they did it. They scheduled the time. Everybody's going out to the field. They're going to do blessings. So they did it. They all go, they pray their hearts out, they go home, nothing doing. No rain. So they went to the town's rabbi, said, we thought this would work. What happened over here? Why did the plan work? So the rabbi said, I'll tell you, very, very simple. Not a single one of you showed up to the field with an umbrella.
Oh.
You guys came there, you guys didn't even believe in it yourself. You weren't expecting rain. If you were expecting rain, you would have been there with an umbrella. So you weren't expecting it to work. What do you want? You want God to make it happen? You should have shown up with an umbrella if you really trusted in God. You believed in God, you didn't trust in God. Blessings sometimes come when you show that you really have real trust. There's one time, there's some video. I maybe should have showed it tonight. Very, very, very powerful. There was a couple who told the Rebbe that for years they were unsuccessful having children. So the Rebbe would always give out $1 for charity. That was always the Rebbe's idea. Whenever we meet, a mitzvah occurs. Every meeting of two Jews, another mitzvah comes into this world. Another $1 has been given to charity. And this was the way of the Rebbe empowering people. The Rebbe was always giving people a mission. The Rebbe always wanted to empower people. So here's $1 to give to charity. And then the Rebbe gave an extra $1 and said, I'm giving you this $1 towards the expenses of a baby carriage. Go buy a baby carriage. What was the Rebbe telling them? Yeah, you got a blessing, right? When I see it, I'll believe it. No. Go buy if you believe God's taking care of you, go buy that baby carriage. As the Rebbe said, there has to be a sense of bitachon, of trust in God, and that itself Bitachon itself brings about God's blessings. Let's read text 5. Linda, we're back at you. Text 5, page 67.
I duly received the telephone message as well as the letter regarding your state of health. From what I have been informed about your progress in matters of Jewish observance, it is surely unnecessary to emphasize to you the importance of bitachon, complete faith and trust in God, not just as an abstraction, but in a way that truly permeates one's entire being. In addition to bitachon being one of the foundations of our faith and way of life, it is also a channel to receive God's blessings, especially for the success of the medical treatment.
So number one, it's simply the Jewish thing to do. It's a Jewish attitude. It's a healthy Jewish attitude. And number two, this is the way we bring God's blessings. I want to show you, I'm going to show you a video in a moment, but I'm also going to jump down and read another text, which is a little bit out of the ordinary, which means the Rebbe did not, this isn't, some of these texts are very representative of what the Rebbe would very typically say. Sometimes the Rebbe would say things which were extraordinary. Text 7. This is extraordinary. But this is, in this specific case, this was how much the Rebbe wanted to encourage this family to try to get themselves in the mode of bitachon. Elki, text 7 on page 70.
I have just received your letter in which you describe your present poor state of health. It might seem logical to delay celebrating your recovery with overjoy until you are actually healed. Nevertheless, it is in fact reasonable to openly rejoice over your healing in advance, despite the reality that your healing has yet to occur. For such joy will actively hasten your recovery. This is in keeping with the oft-repeated Yiddish saying of the Chabad Rebbe's Tracht gut wird sein gut, think positively and you will see positive results. Obviously, this approach is far more effective when you translate optimistic thinking into verbalized joy and joyful activity.
This is very exceptional. I was saying celebrate the recovery, even though he's not better yet. But this trust in God that things will turn out well, itself brings the blessings, right? Such joy will actively hasten the recovery. All right, and here we got another video for this third point.
ביום אחד אני מקבל מכתב מהבית, שאבא קיבל התקפת לב, והוא במצב אנוש. אני מקבל מכתב כזה, מה אני צריך לחשוב? ומה, כן, אז אני הכנסתי מכתב לרבי, כבר אינני יודע מה לחשוב. אז הרבי לקח את המכתב הזה, עשה קו מתחת למילים האלה, הוא כותב, ולפלא, 3 סימני קריאה ככה, אתה רואה את העוצמה שבזה ככה, ולפלא, שהרי ידוע בכגון דע, ציווי נישואינו רבותינו, טראכט גוט וזיין גוט, ואחכה לבשורות טובות. קיבלתי את המכתב הזה, ידעתי שם שאני חי, טוב, המשכתי להגיד תהילים וכן הלאה, זה יום חמישי בלילה. עובר את השבת, ביום ראשון עזרתי אומץ וטלפנתי הביתה. אמא שלי מרימה את הטלפון, שאלתי אותה מה שלום, אבא יצא מכלל סכנה. עברתי את הכביש והלכתי במינכה שם, ואמרתי שהרבי יוצא ממינכה, נו, הראתם שטויבס פמיר? אמרתי לו, כן, יצא מכלל סכנה. מתי? אמרתי לו, ביום חמישי בערב. אז הוא שואל אותי, מתי אתה התחלת לחשוב טוב?
לא היו לנו ילדים כמה שנים, דבר שמאוד מאוד כאב לי. וזה היה עם דיאגנוזה של רופא שטען שאני לעולם לא אוכל, מבחינה ביולוגית, אני לא אוכל ללדת ילדים. אמרתי לבעלי שאני רוצה לנסוע לרבה. אמרתי לרבה שאני רוצה ילדים. בכיתי הרבה. הרבה הסתכל עליי ואומר לי, הייתכן שבחורה שלמדה בבית יעקב תולה תקווה אך ורק ברפואה הקונבנציונלית, הוא עושה לי כך, ואפסה תקווה מן השמיים, ומן הראוי שישבו וילמדו את ספר חובת הלבבות, שער הביטחון, ולא יצטרכו יותר לבכות. והקדוש ברוך הוא יברך אותם בבנים ובנות חסידיים, יראי שמיים, ויזכו לגדלם לתורה, לחופה ולמעשים טובים.
God Almighty bless you to God for strength and parnos, and to them seem to have more daughters. God Almighty send you have more brachas from God Almighty. More daughters are more brachas. And they speak in Swedish, not my versions.
עכשיו, אנחנו ישבנו ולמדנו, והייתה תקופה שגם נתתי הרצאות לקבוצות על ביטחון בהשם. וכמובן שזה חיזק אותי מאוד, והבכי כבר נגמר, לא הייתי צריכה לבכות, וגם הקדוש ברוך הוא עזר מיד.
God Almighty bless you that you no need to be talking because you have it in charity.
אז הרב אומר לי, נו, soll sich noch einmal nicht treffen, solche Sachen, sollt wissen, alle Menschen trachten gut.
Powerful stories once again, huh? There you have it. When facing these situations, this is point number 3. There has to be the sense of trust. So, dear friends, this is the first part of today's class, the value and the importance of the Rebbe's advice, that there has to be good energy when facing a medical challenge. Once again, whenever we face a medical challenge, or it's a loved one, a friend, we need to make sure that we are there to support them with good energy. And the 3 specific, practical pieces of advice are: number 1, to keep yourself as productive as possible. Number 2, identify the spiritual mission within the challenge and focus on completing it. And number 3, make sure to work on developing faith and trust in God. And these are the 3 keys that will help build up a sense of positivity, optimism, and even in a difficult time, you're in a good space. And as we learned pragmatically, that is very good for the patient. A patient who's in a good mental and emotional space is going to recover better, and on a deeper level, that brings God's blessings. All right. That's point number 1. That's priority number 1, good vibes. Once we got good vibes in check, what's the next step? The next step is you got to go to a doctor. Nah, that was a big shocker, no? You got to go to a doctor. No. But when the Rebbe tells you to go to a doctor, it's very profound. Okay? This isn't regular. Now we're going to move to point 2 of today's class, doctor's orders. And as you can see on the screen there, this is the doctor's orders. Marshall could read it. I can't. Oh, it's upside down. How would I know? This is the doctor's orders. You know, I think most people would say, listen, I trust in God, and then I do what I got to do. I go to my doctor. You know, I can't fully rely on God to take care of it. I also got a backup plan. I go to my doctor too. By the Rebbe, everything was holistic. If you go to a doctor, that all ties in. Text 8. Let's read text 8. Amy, we're up to you. Page 71. This is actually from last week's Torah portion. Text 8 from the Talmud, page 71. Go for it, Amy.
The Torah states, "He shall provide for his cure." This informs us that God has granted physicians permission to provide healing.
The Talmud says something which is very profound. The Torah itself teaches us that one should go to somebody to get a cure and to get healing. And the Torah itself is informing us that God granted physicians permission to provide healing. Now, what's going on over here? This is a piece of Talmud. The Rebbe repeated these words of the Talmud very often. You know, there's an interesting school of philosophy, and in a certain way, you could appreciate the argument that says it is anti-religion to go to a doctor. Why? Because if you truly believe in God, God made you sick. Are you trying to cheat God? If God wants to get better, God will make you better. God runs the world. You can go to a doctor. And it's like a chutzpah. God wants this person to be sick, and you're now going to come and try to intervene and try to undo God's doing. The Talmud tells us that's not Jewish. It's not the Jewish attitude. The Jewish attitude is that God gave permission. God empowered within the rules of nature. There should be people, there should be a science called medicine, and God's blessings flow through the natural tools of medicine, through the healing hands of doctors. So what's the attitude? Healing comes from God. But the agents of God are the doctors. From God through the doctors. So when a Jew goes to a doctor, it's a whole different experience. You're not going to a doctor because he has good ratings on Google, and you got to go to a doctor. It's a religious experience. The Torah says we got to go to doctors. That is how we access God's blessings of healing, by going to a doctor. And because of this, part of the Rebbe's guidance was we need to go to doctors, and it has to be part of this attitude of trust. We're trusting in God that God's going to take care of us, and we're going to access God's blessings through the tools, through the efforts of this doctor. And because of that, the Rebbe encouraged people. And us Jews, we get very anxious about these things. We become very untrusting of doctors. We just over-obsess and over what the doctors say, and we want to get other opinions. I'll show you soon. The Rebbe was a fan of getting multiple opinions, but not in a way of over-obsessiveness. We have to know that this is how God wants. This is the formula God put into place. God's giving us blessings, and the way those blessings flow into our natural world is through the efforts of the doctor. Let's read text 9. It's such a powerful text. Text 9, page 72. Max, go for it.
You should observe our sage's directive to follow your doctor's orders and do it happily. What difference does it make to you if you fulfill God's will in a particular way or through particular means? The main thing is to avoid overthinking the matter and to instead focus on doing God's will. In this case, God has directed you to obey your doctor, so you should do so and be gratified that you have the opportunity to fulfill God's will, and you should therefore do it with joy. In fact, when you will act in this manner, God will help you so that you will clearly see gratifying results. I hope that you will write me back to inform me that you have adopted this approach, and may God add in his blessings to you and your family for good health and ample livelihood.
We don't know what this writer, we don't know what the recipient of this letter told the Rebbe, what was going on. You can just imagine, he wasn't trusting the doctors, he wasn't listening to the doctor's advice, and he was maybe even playing religious shtick. Yeah, I believe in God, I'm not listening to the doctors. And the Rebbe was saying, no, this is what God wants you to do. We listen to God, and you daven in the morning, you put on tefillin, and you listen to God by going to the doctor and following what he tells you. And do it joyfully. This is how God wants you to do it. And in this way, they give a whole different appreciation for the idea that we go to doctors, and it's holistic. It's a spiritual experience. It's a religious experience. The way I think of it is that when I go to a doctor, I believe in the doctor more than he believes in himself. Because he just gives me his opinion. I'm coming on the mandate of the Torah. You got to, whatever you say, I listen. That's very powerful. So here we go. This is the doctor's orders. What the Rebbe taught is, a doctor is God's agent for healing. When you go to a doctor, you're not placing your trust out of God's hands saying, okay, now I'm going to go to the doctor. The Jewish attitude is, we're going to the doctor to access God's blessings. And when we follow the doctor's orders, that is how we access God's wishes. So with this attitude, I want to share with you 3 pieces of advice that the Rebbe gave, of practically speaking how we should approach from the Rebbe's advice viewpoint, from the Torah's viewpoint. What do we do? Number 1, especially when it's a major medical decision, the Rebbe said, get more than one opinion. Because again, the way the Torah wants that the way the Torah tells us God's blessings come into the world is through the natural means. So we have to do our effort. Doing our effort means we go to one doctor, we go to another doctor, a second opinion. Let's read text 11. Marsha, would you like to read? Jumping to text 11, page 75.
My general response to questions regarding medical matters is that one should follow the advice of an expert doctor. It is best to consult with two experts, and when there's a difference of opinion, one should ask a third and follow the majority.
So on the one hand, the Rebbe was not promoting to blindly trust the very first thing a doctor tells you to do. No, again, there's a natural order. You go to one doctor, he tells you an idea, go to a second doctor. If there's difference of opinion, go to a third and follow the majority. And that's point number one, get a second opinion. Number two, the Rebbe promoted to especially work on consulting a doctor who is a friend. In Hebrew, it's called a rofe yedid, a doctor friend. What's a doctor friend? Why a doctor friend? Because you want a doctor who understands you, gives you the proper attention, takes genuine interest and care in your life and in what's happening. And you don't want impersonal care. You don't want impersonal care. And especially when it's a more serious condition, try that it should be a doctor who is a friend. And it's very, very interesting. Today, and it's just one of the, I'll share with you a little bit of within the world of Chabad. It's a few years ago this initiative started. There's an initiative called the Rofe Yedid Initiative, that for any Chabad rabbi around the world who's going through a health crisis in their family, there is an office, and they have many leading professionals from around the nation, medical professionals, and any Chabad shliach who's going through a difficult time, they could be connected to this doctor, and the doctor will be like their Rofe Yedid, a doctor who's not actually their doctor, not local with them, but can help talk them through, go through the options with them in a way that's very caring. It's an interesting thing that only started a few years ago to support the network of Chabad Shluchim around the world. They should have access that whenever they're going through a difficult time medically. So this was point number two. Everybody should try to find a doctor who's a friend. And so number one, before I tell you the next thing, I want to read this next text with you. So with this attitude, 1 second, go to 2 doctors, 3 doctors, get a rofe, and then you listen. Trust in the system. And I want to read this next text before we go on. I'll get to you in a second. Let's read text, going back a little bit. Rachel, text 10 on page 74. It's a very strong letter here from the Rebbe. You got that?
Okay. I am pained to hear that you are spending all your time running frantically to doctors. I am astonished at your husband as well. What is the justification for this misuse of your trait of alacrity? Alacrity is generally a beneficial quality, but panic is always a fault. Anyway, alacrity is not always appropriate. You should be filled with faith and trust in God, who creates, sustains, and animates the entire universe and all of its contents, with even more particular attention to each Jew, being that they are members of the nation that is close to him. Trust that he will provide you with good health, so that together with your husband you will raise your son to Torah, to marriage, and to good deeds. True, it is always necessary to follow natural channels. You must consult a doctor and follow their instructions. However, totally engrossing yourself in this matter, immersing yourself in medicine and medical matters, and intensely deliberating and debating the exact reasons for the doctor's opinion, that is not your role. That is exclusively the realm of medical professionals performing their duties as the Torah directs. He should administer healing. Everyone else needs to use the intelligence and mental skills with which God has blessed them for alternative concerns. Some for Torah study and mitzvah observance, others for conducting material affairs that are able to be transformed into mitzvah-based undertakings. But anxiety, worry, and dejection serve only to weaken your physical and spiritual health.
So over here, what's Rebbe telling him? The one hand, there wants to get 2 or 3 opinions. But then this guy is already he's having anxiety, he's in a panic, he's obsessively running, he's reading up the whole Wikipedia to tell his doctor, what about this? And you got that wrong, and you didn't tell me about that. Rebbe says, listen, that's already wrong. You do your due diligence, you do the natural, but then you have to have trust. And at a certain point, I think what the Rebbe is saying is, when you have too little trust, and you're just overly obsessively worried about the medical treatment, that's actually a sign of a lack of trust in God. Trust the system that God put into place. You do what you need to do, you get a doctor, 2 opinions, 3 opinions, discuss it with your doctor who's a friend, and then you sit back and relax and put your trust in God and say, I did my part, now it's time for God to deliver the blessings. Again, it's a whole different attitude, the way the Rebbe told people to go to a doctor.
I think lately also, when people are running from doctor to doctor, they're trying to get an answer that they want.
Right.
And it's not always a good answer. They may want to hear that they're doomed, or that taking the medicine that has horrible side effects is not the right answer. And so, it goes almost beyond trust into okay, I'm going to become the super expert to save myself from the consequences.
Yeah, it's a form of self-delusion, yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously this person I was writing to, it's his son, so you can't blame anybody. His son is going through a medical crisis, and he as the father just was going crazy. And the Rebbe says this is not okay. But point number 3, the final point about how to deal with doctors is, the Torah's mandate to doctors is to administer healing. The Torah never gave them the mandate to become the prophets of doom and gloom. Doctors don't have a right to play God. So doctors should heal. Doctors should guide you in health. Doctors shouldn't be giving definitive, terrible prognoses. You will never have children. You will die in 6 months from now. Who are you? Who gave you the right to speak this way? God empowered you to bring about the blessings of healing. What's going to happen after that? That's God's business. And whenever anybody would come with an alarm to the Rebbe, my doctor told me, the Rebbe would say, just forget about what they said. It's none of their business. It's outside of the purview of the doctor. They don't know. And doctors tell you this themselves. As much as medicine is a science, so much can't be explained. Sometimes you administer the right medicines, nothing's helping. Sometimes it looks like all hope is lost, and all of a sudden there's a recovery. Yeah. Doctors are there to administer healing. The moment they cross that line, no good anymore. And the Rebbe wanted that we should have that attitude. Doctors have a right to heal, not to play a god or a prophet. With this attitude, a holistic approach to going to doctors, this was how the Rebbe approached the whole practical guidance of engaging with the world of the healthcare system, dealing with doctors. We do what we have to do pragmatically, but anchored in faith and trust in God. And these are the 3 specific pointers. And here's for a video. Very, 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 very special story.
Esty Ash lives in Johannesburg, South Africa, with her family.
Kids were older. They were all avid bike riders. Uriel went outside. He was going up the road. He didn't take his helmet. And he was riding in the street. And a car, it was a very narrow street with cars parked on both sides, and a car was obviously trying to get through. With Uriel in the street, he couldn't, so he hooted at Uriel. Uriel turned around to look at the car, and as he turned his bike in front of the car as well, and the car hit him. And he flew off his bike over the hood of the car and smashed the windscreen with his head. The ambulance came to take us, and I was asking them questions, and they didn't answer me, and he was unconscious. There was no response. When we got to the hospital, they took Uriel away to try to resuscitate him, and they sent me to fill in the form. And one of the questions on the form is age. Now, this was a week before Uriel's 14th birthday. But I desperately needed 14, so I didn't write 13. I wrote 14. Even though he was technically still 13, I needed that 14, so I wrote 14. And that became relevant later too. They called me in to talk to him and hold his hand and see if it would elicit a reaction, and it didn't. A lady came, she gave me some money to make a phone call, and I phoned Michael, and Michael's my husband, and I made it sound like it wasn't serious, and he came to the hospital, and then they called us both in to see if we could get a reaction out of Uriel, hold his hand, stroke his head, talk to him. There was nothing. And I think when Michael realized the gravity of the situation, he phoned Rabbi Lipsker, who was a close friend of ours. He phoned the Rebbe's office for a bracha, and also because there was no reaction from Uriel, the doctor in charge, the registrar in charge of trauma, casualty, had decided that they weren't going to take any active medical care as far as he was concerned. They were just going to leave him. And then came the Rebbe's bracha. The Rebbe basically said, Askir al Atzion, we should hear Basuras Tovos. And there was a specific message to the doctor saying that he is a Rofeh, and as a Rofeh, a doctor, he is a Shaliach of Hashem. And his job is to administer treatment and do whatever he can, and Hashem will decide the outcome. And as a result of that, he decided to go against the instructions of his superior doctor and administer treatment. So they took Uriel, they didn't even put him in ICU because they weren't going to bother doing anything with him, but they put him in a normal ward. Now, the best ward in the hospital was the pediatric ward, and the maximum age for the pediatric ward is 13. But I'd written 14 on the form. But Gary Schwartz, the doctor, knowing that this was the best ward in the hospital, put him into the pediatric ward. And against the instructions of his superior doctor, he put him on a respirator and administered whatever medical treatment he could for Uriel to save his life. Early the next morning, at about 6, Uriel came to. And all I could say is that it was seeing the Nefesh Elokis at work, because with his eyes still closed, he did this, and he did this. He wanted Negelas. I mean, he had just come round. It was amazing. And when the doctor in charge came to do his rounds, and he saw that Uriel was wide awake, I think he learned a very big lesson. But as for Gary, this was the first step in his journey to becoming frum. He had witnessed a miracle.
Your job is to be a healer. Your job is not to decide that this kid it's the end of his life. You do what you got to do. The outcomes, that's God's business. We are running out of time in typical fashion. But I want to do one, before moving on to our final section over here, I want to go to text 6, go back a little bit. Bonnie, would you like to read? We're going to go back a little bit, back in the book. Text 6 on page 68. Where there are comments on this idea of having trust, and even if the doctors say whatever they say, we have to know that from our belief standpoint, that is not the final word. So text 6, Bonnie.
There is no basis for despondency or despair. We have clearly seen God perform nature-transcending miracles, even for individuals and especially in recent years. Moreover, in many instances, doctors err in their diagnosis, despite conducting a plethora of tests. This is especially true of diagnostics related to internal organs. In addition to all the above, you should be aware that new medical remedies are constantly appearing. However, it is of utmost necessity, it is impossible for it to be otherwise, that you strengthen your connection with God, the healer of all flesh and performer of wonders. This description is to be taken literally. God performs actual miracles and wonders for individuals, the proof being that each and every one of us recites this blessing. And we
were it untrue, we would be erring by reciting a formal blessing in vain.
So no matter what, we have to know that no matter what the doctors say, ultimately it's in God's hands. And the Rebbe gives a few examples. We see these stories happen. Things change, doctors make mistakes, new treatments come out. And this was the Rebbe's attitude to dealing with doctors. Okay, for the next 10 minutes I want to conclude with the final point, spiritual health. We spoke about emotional health, the idea of being positive and upbeat. We spoke about physical health, the practical side of things, the Jewish attitude, the way the Rebbe taught for us to engage with doctors. And we're now going to be speaking about spiritual health, the spiritual side of healthcare. In the Rebbe's holistic approach to medicine and healing, physical health is good for spiritual health, and spiritual health is good for physical health. We need both. They're intertwined. They come together. One affects the other. So let's begin with the first one. Spiritual health, physical health impacts spiritual health. Let's begin for this idea, text 12 from Maimonides, and the Rebbe again would very often quote these opening words of Maimonides. Stuart, we're back at you. Text 12, page 77.
The spiritual side of healthcare. Maintaining a healthy and sound body is among the ways of serving God, for one cannot properly understand or have knowledge of the Creator when ill. Therefore, one must avoid that which harms the body and accustom oneself to that which is healthful and helps the body become stronger.
Maimonides tells it to us. Don't think that taking care of yourself is, that's a good thing to do, but nothing to do with Judaism. No, it's a way of serving God. You need a good, healthy, strong body in order to serve God. We need good physical health in order to serve God because a healthy soul needs a healthy body. If we serve God with our body, then that's what we need. So this simple idea, taking good care of ourselves, is of real business. It's a spiritual project to make sure we're healthy. To take it even further, let's read this next text. Text 13, page 78, Debbie.
Treasuring God's treasure. I am pained to hear that you feel that your health has noticeably declined. I am also pained to hear that you are not careful to follow your doctor's directives. I heard directly from my saintly father-in-law, the Rebbe, that his own father, the Rebbe Rashab, said, "Look how precious the Jewish body is to God. He provided us with so much just for its sake. As is known, God specifically chose to give his Torah and the mitzvot to souls that are housed in corporeal bodies, and not to the angels. Now, if the Creator considers the body so very precious, we must be exceptionally careful to take good care of this treasure deposit with which God has entrusted us."
Simply the idea to value our bodies. It's God's gift to us, and we see how much God values our physical lives. He gave the Torah to souls in bodies. And it's the simple idea that our bodies is a treasure entrusted to us by God, and therefore simply taking good care of ourselves. And the Rebbe would speak about this. The Rebbe was also very into preventative medicine. Don't only administer healing. Once somebody gets sick, health itself is a Jewish value. Simply the idea of exercise, good hygiene, good diets. We'll see soon the Rebbe speaking about this. The Rebbe wanted doctors to empower people to value health as a spiritual pursuit. Again, holistic medicine. But it also goes the other way. If physical impacts the spiritual, if you look at the screen, let's switch it as well. Spiritual as well impacts the physical. Spiritual health is needed for physical health. Sometimes the root cause for a lack in physical health is actually a spiritual problem. Right? Every good doctor knows you don't treat symptoms, you treat core issues, right? What's the real word? Not core issues. You don't treat symptoms, you treat the problem itself. The problem itself. Sometimes when there's a lack in physical health, sometimes there's actually a spiritual problem that's triggering this. Because again, spiritual and physical come together. Let's read text 14. Mark, we're by you. Page 79.
The blueprint of creation. The Torah is the source of all creation and the conduit through which God's effluence flows to the world. As our sages taught, God looked into the Torah and created the world. And this Torah-based creation reoccurs every day. As it is stated, in his goodness, God renews each day and continuously the act of creation. Therefore, when matters of Torah and mitzvot are observed as they should be, our physical affairs are in order as well.
A mitzvah is not only good for spiritual health. Oh, mitzvah gets you good. Everything physical is deeply connected with spiritual reality as well. If things are good spiritually, things are good physically. Sometimes when things are not good physically, it's actually an indicator there's something spiritually here that needs help as well. And the Rebbe very much promoted this. Sometimes when we see that there's a lack in health, sometimes the spiritual health that needs an extra boost. So we have another video I want to show over here to you, but this is the idea that the benefits of the Torah's directives are practical material, and the Rebbe very often advised, let's look at spiritual health. Sometimes that's the real core issue behind the symptom.
That was July 1989. I wasn't feeling well. I had pains in my stomach. And I went to my gastroenterologist, who was a big mumcha, and he took an endoscopy. And he's straightforward. He says, I got very bad news to tell you. I said, well, what? And you got a big problem. You got to go get x-rays and everything, and you have to have an operation on your stomach, otherwise you're in dire sakana. I called the 770. Benjamin Klein answered the phone. And Benjamin went into the Rebbe, and he came right back and called me up, but the Rebbe said that I should look over all my mezuzahs, was in this house, and my Rashi's film, and Rabbeinu Tam's film. And I went over to the Sefer. So he takes out the parsha, and he shows me that it's the word Zoch and Zikaron was blotted out. You can't use these film, he says. He had just written 4 parshas for Shel Rosh, so I bought it from another spot because I didn't want to be without film. And Baruch Hashem, I had the operation, and everything was all right. And I called Benjamin to thank the Rebbe, that the Rebbe saved my life. So the Rebbe said to him, this is the refuah.
אני מוכן לנצל ולבקש את ברכתך לקצין שנמצא אצלי במשלחת וקיבל לא עלינו שיתוק, שמו עודד יונה בן שרה.
רציתי גם ברכה בשבילו, וכדאי שיבדקו התפילין שלו, וזה יש לי בביטחון. ברכה והצלחה.
תודה רבה, תודה רבה.
כאן איננו מובן ביוחס ביטחון גשמי, אבל מובן ביוחס ביטחון רוחני. בשורות טובות.
Rebbe, in the last about 2.5 years, I've got a pain in my body, like in my muscles, like a stiffness that moves around. I've been to doctors and the Abishers to Duncan, they've said there's nothing wrong with this or that, but I still get the pains from time to time. Could I ask you as well, Rebbe, if you don't mind, if I could have a bracha for that? It's been about 2.5 years.
Probably you must do something about the kashrus, about the observing the laws of kashrus. Maybe there is something wrong with Chol Yisrael or Pas Yisrael. Als ik misses aan kashrus van de vierde stier, helpt ons dus zoals de terrorisme. Dat is dit zo gemaakt.
העיניים שלי מאוד מאוד חלשות העיניים, ואני מבקשת ברכה לרפואה שלמה.
אני צריך לזור בקידוש ובהבדלה. זה עצב בלי של מים.
It's fascinating, no? Different things, the Rebbe says a different mitzvah. Maybe this, maybe that. Very, very, very powerful. The Rebbe saw physical health and spiritual health as very, very intertwined. Dear friends, it's 9:02, which means that our time is up. But before you go, I want to leave you with a little bit of an encore. And I want to share with you, it's actually a 3-minute video from an interview with this Professor Shani that I mentioned at the beginning of the class, who is a doctor. And this was probably, the Rebbe had many discussions with him about many of the topics that we spoke about in this class. And it's very, very fascinating to hear what he repeats from the conversation that he had with the Rebbe about this. And I think the final point here, which really deserves its own separate class, is what the Rebbe advised to doctors. All in line with what we've said, but from the doctor's perspective. The Rebbe wanted doctors to have this attitude as well. Stop treating bodies, treat people. Body, soul, mind, emotional health, spiritual health. Take interest in the people who you are healing. Make sure they're in a good space. All of these things, patient empowerment I'll speak about, and I think you'll really see all these ideas coming to life in his interview here. So here's our final piece over here.
Professor Mordechai Shani serves as Professor of Healthcare Systems at Tel Aviv University and is a recipient of the Israel Prize. In 1976, while serving as Director General of the Sheba Medical Center, he was part of a group that arrived at 770 for the celebration of Simchas Torah.
הרבי הגיע אלינו, שוחח עם כל אחד מאיתנו כדקה, מאחר והוא שאל אותי מאיפה אני, וסיפרתי לו שבאתי מבית חולים, הוא מיד שאל אותי מדוע אתם קוראים לזה בית חולים ולא בית רפואה, ואמר לי, אתה יודע מה, בהזדמנות בוא ניפגש ונשוחח יותר בשקט ובניחותא. כעבור בערך שנה, אינני זוכר את התאריך המדויק, בתיאום עם הרב קליין נקבעה פגישה עם הרבי. הפגישה הייתה בחדרו, חדר צנוע, שמתאים לאישיותו של הרבי. היא לא עסקה בנושאים אישיים. היא עסקה למעשה בשיחה בערך של כחצי שעה, 25 דקות, שדנה למעשה בעולם הרפואה. ראשית, אחד הדברים המעניינים, שגם מאפיינים את הרבי, שהוא שם דגש על נפשו של האדם, וראה בנושא הנפש מקור לחוזקו של האדם. ככל שהאדם בעל נפש חזקה יותר, הוא יכול להתמודד יותר טוב בחיים. הגענו דרך אגב לשיחה גם על ביקורי אנשים אצל חולים, והוא הדגיש את החשיבות של זה, לא רק מבחינת זו שאתה בא לבקר חולה, אלא בזה שאתה בא לחזק אותו. אתה נותן לו תחושה שהוא איננו לבד, שזה אחד הדברים היפים בקהילה החרדית, שבו הקהילה עוזרת לאדם החולה ומחזקת את נפשו. בהמשך דיברנו על נושא נוסף, שהוא גם כן מאוד מעניין, כי הוא מתקשר למגמה שיש היום ברפואה, וזה נושא מקומו של האדם בבריאותו. אמר הרבי, נכון שיש רופאים, אבל הוא אמר משהו שהיום מתחילים לדבר על זה, שבאים ונסים לשכנע את בני האדם, אל תתלה את יהבך ברופאים, אם אתה לא תדאג לבריאותך, אם אתה לא תקפיד לאכול נכון, להתעמל, לישון טוב, אתה תפגע בבריאותך. זהו נושא שהיום בעולם המערבי קוראים לו patient empowerment. חזק, תעצים את האדם ותשכנע אותו שהוא אחראי לבריאותו. מעניין שהרבי לפני 30 שנה כבר מדבר על העצמת האדם, שהאדם הוא אחראי לבריאותו. הרי זה כלל בסיסי במה שנקרא רפואה מונעת וקידום בריאות. אתה אחראי לבריאותך, הרופא יכול לעזור לך, הוא לא יכול להחליף אותך. מבחינה זו, השיחה הייתה מאוד מעניינת, כי הרבי בכמה נושאים למעשה הקדים את זמנו. אפרופו דרך אגב, הסוגיה שהוא התחיל איתי בפגישה הראשונה, למה הוא קורא בית רפואה? אומר הרבי, אתם שמים דגש על החולי, אני שם את הדגש על הבריאות. אני רוצה להדגיש שאתם הולכים למקום שרוצה לשפר את הרפואה שלכם, את הבריאות שלכם, לא את החולי שלכם. זה מתקשר בדיוק לתפיסה של הרבי, שבא ואמר, רבותיי, הבריאות תלויה בך. אל תקדש את החולי, תקדש את הבריאות.
He talks like a general, no? In Israel, huh? Dear friends, with that we conclude lesson 3 of Advice for Life. Thank you all so much for joining. Next week, we got a big class. Healthy at heart, emotional health, anxiety. From the world of the Rebbe's advice. Thank you all so much for joining. Have a wonderful night. And we'll see you all soon. Until next time.